Chapter 28. If the swordsman casts aside two thoughts, life and death, nothing can defeat his mind. That was the credo of the formidable warrior samurai Bokyuden, who lived during the early 17th century. Focus on Noda, I told myself, not on staying alive. What we had to do was overcome him and the money of Japan by the power of mind, by beating him at his own game. That was the only way we could win. As I saw it, we might actually have the advantage. We knew his strategy, so all we had to do now was move inside his defense perimeter. In a way, we were even closer than he realized. Noda was obsessed with Nipponica, and a samurai concentrating on his sword is not able to attack. The thing to remember was rhythm, the beat. We had to get out of sync with him, disrupt his pacing. When Tam and I retreated to my office, I noticed that my katana was missing. No surprise, but it didn't really matter. We would be using the no-sword technique anyway, moving under his hilt, then going in for the kill. Jim Bob would be our new weapon. At the moment, Noda's new hatchet man was strolling around the floor in his dingy white suit, toting his Uzi, and monitoring us with an occasional vacant stare as he watched the terminals flash. His bumpkin facade, incidentally, had to be the best acting job I'd seen since the Royal Shakespeare. He may have been a spaced-out options hustler at heart, but he could coach Machiavelli on duplicity. A worthy opponent. Just hit 9% of IBM. He glanced at a CRT screen as he ambled down the row next to my office, swinging the automatic. Telephone looks good for 12% buy. Opening bell tomorrow. Good thing we've got a computer and these fake accounts. Otherwise, we might have to cut the SEC in on the news a little too early. Well, DNI was nothing if not organized. Global trading was on a roll. There would be no way to trace Noda or to stop him. By the time anybody realized what was afoot, he'd be well on the way to having us literally bought out. God knows, Japan had the money. Jim Bob, I yelled across. Mind telling me what the hell it is you really think you're up to? I'm making history. He grinned and waved his Uzi in the air. You're getting to watch the dawn of a new age. For your wallet, I beckoned him over. Tell me something. You didn't actually sell any of the high-tech stocks on Tam's list after all, did you? Hell no. He was still grinning. All we did was play games a little. Whenever I sold anything, I just turned around and bought it back a few minutes later. So where's all the money coming from for this big blue-chip takeover? We got a whole new financial network in place. Mr. Noda worked it out with the pension funds over there. Well, it seems to me you ought to be doing this thing right. Why think small? Pick up some more shares of those high-tech issues in the old portfolio, too. He stared at me with his bloodshot eyes. How come we'd want to bother with that? Just thought maybe you'd like to make a score. Huh. Besides, down the line, it'd probably impress hell out of Noda. The man admires initiative. What was it you said about a score? He was blinking in erratic bursts, still flying on uppers. Forget it, just a crazy idea that crossed my mind. I turned and walked back into the office, where Tam was waiting. What was that all about? Tam, did you hear what those bastards did? I was steaming. They blew my daughter's college money. I heard. Well, it pisses me off, like I can't begin to describe. I gathered that. She looked at me strangely. He finally. Got to you, didn't he? Noda finally pulled your cork. No more Mr. Cool. You got it, lady. She continued to study me, and into her eyes crept a kind of affection I didn't even know they possessed. Guess that makes two of us, Matt. He found out how to get to me, and now he's found out the one thing you care about. Guess he did at that. Well, now you know how I feel. He broke the rules, Tam. That's not part of the game. But do you understand what this means? Now I'm free to do anything I want. Honor is out the window. This isn't a game. You're right, it's a battle, but even battles have rules. My God, Matsuo to the end. Call it what you want, but I am now going to destroy them both totally. Wipe them out. They've given me no choice. How exactly do you propose doing that? I made the opening move just now. Next time, later. I glanced up to see Jim Bob approaching. He was staring at me, glassy-eyed. What was that you were saying a while ago? Don't remember, Jim Bob. Something about a score. Oh, that, nothing really. Don't start getting cute, Walton. He sighted his Uzi around the office. Nobody screws with you, right? Better believe it, sport. Well, I was just wondering, since Noda's tied up at the moment, if you might want to go ahead and make a little money on the side. I'm not doing so bad. Fine, since you're not interested anyway, we can just skip it. No big deal. Hang on a second. His eyes seemed to be trying to focus as he stared through his gun sights. What's the play? Merely a wild idea, that's all. I was wondering what would happen if you bought a few call options on those stocks already in the portfolio, then boosted the prices on those too. You mean on those high-tech outfits we were supposed to start selling? Well, the setup's just sitting out there. You've got all that. Japanese pension money and Noda's computer. No reason not to kite those high-tech issues a little and pick up some pocket change. Fun and games to while away the time. But then maybe you've already made all you want to. Hey, asshole, there's two things you can't ever get too much of, and one of them's money. He was rocking mechanically. Matter of fact, this action we're generating is driving up the March calls for our new buys to the point where the price is getting way out of line. Had to happen. Everybody else in town has figured out somebody's driving the market. They're getting on the options bandwagon too, bidding them up. So why not play a little market shell game with those issues already in the portfolio? Buy some calls, and then kite the price on them as well. Show Noda a thing or two. Kind of stick it to the boss man. He paused. Think of it as insurance, just to make sure you come out of this play whole. Tell you a secret about Noda. With that guy, you know you've got a deal when the check clears. He's a crafty fucker, grant you. You might want to give it some thought. But if you're going to make a move, it's probably now or never. Be the early bird or forget it. All this time Tam was looking at me as if I'd gone over the edge. I began to deeply regret not having filled her in on the fallback scenario. The door to Noda's office was now closed, his two guards posted outside. Guess even a samurai needs some rest and tranquility after flying halfway around the globe in a chartered Concorde. Well, gotta admit it's an idea. Jim Bob continued to weave unsteadily. His motor mechanisms were now on automatic, along with his venal corn-pone brain. Matt, what in hell are you doing? Tam was pulling me back into the office. Stay cool. Swordsmanship is like Zen. You can't ever let your mind get attached to anything. Do that and you're stuck. Your mind stays with the past and makes you neglect what lies ahead. So I figure the best thing to do here is to adjust to the new prevailing conditions. I glanced out at Jim Bob, now just beyond the door, and absently humming some Waylon Jennings tune as he swayed solo. Well, I want to know what you're up to. Okay, here's the play. While you were setting up your sell-off scheme, I did some fiddling on my own. Remember back when we started out, I fast-talked Noda into giving me power of attorney. Well, it finally paid off. Last week, I convened an instant shareholders meeting for every company where DNI owns a majority of the stock, and personally voted through a new set of resolutions. Mind filling me in on what they were? Before I could reply, Jim Bob came dancing in, licking his pale lips. Walton, tell you what. Think I'm gonna go for it. What? I looked up. That options play. Comes a time you gotta look out for yourself and fuck everybody. That's the kind of thinking made this country what it is today, Jim Bob. Right on. Fucking a baby. He did a quick dance step. Go for the gold. You know, as long as we're at it, how about a little piece of the action for me too? Nothing big. Just a couple of bucks for old time's sake. Why the hell not? He let out a whoop as he turned and headed for a terminal. Give you sloppy seconds on this one, Ace. Just long as I get first pop. Matt, I don't know what you're up to, but I'll kill you if you start helping him. She looked like she would too. You know, you once said you wanted to drive a stake into DNI heart. I turned back. Well, this is your chance, but we've got to get moving and do it before Noda catches on. Whereupon we joined Jim Bob in front of his monitor. He was now busy pulling up quotes for March calls on the Chicago Board Options Exchange, the SIBO. He checked them over, then got on the phone directly to the market makers on the floor. When you're operating in hyperdrive, you don't dawdle around with brokers. Jim Bob, while you're doing that, I think I'll just start setting up the buy orders for the stock. If we want to move prices, we've got to have coordination. Yahoo, let's kick some ass. He just entered a wholly new dimension of exuberance. Shit fire and save your matches. Fuck a duck and see what hatches. My sentiments precisely. I started scrolling up DNI. Portfolio of high-tech securities, looking for the biggies. If things went as planned, our screwing of Matsuo Noda was definitely going to be memorable. Now Jim Bob was chortling quietly to himself as he punched up more numbers, moving on to bilk options traders on the Amex. Matthew, you'd better finish explaining what you're up to. Tam was standing behind me, her hand gripping my shoulder. Look, we have to do this fast. Switch a beat on Noda, break his rhythm. Just trust me. My favorite word. She didn't move. Now I pointed to a column of green numbers on the left-hand side of the screen. Are those the percentage holdings DNI has? Looks correct. They were about what I remembered. DNI positions varied from around 50% to the low 60s. Okay, I turned to face her. Which of these do you want to knock out first? There may not be time to torpedo them all. What are you going to do? She was frowning, but I could tell the idea had appeal. Set dynamite under them. Just blow them sky high. How? Using an obscure corporate anti-takeover tactic not many people know about yet. Jim Bob's right. We're going to make history. Nobody's ever done this on the scale you're about to witness. Just pick the stocks you want detonated first, but please hurry. I shoved a pen and paper at her, then turned to watch Jim Bob, now dancing around with a phone in his ear, still buying calls on the old DNI portfolio. How are we doing over there, Chief? Don't want to push March too hard, tip off the market, so I'm picking up some Junes too. He yelled my way. We're going long, baby. Jim Bob, I was just wondering. Don't you think you ought to hedge a little, just in case? Maybe buy a few puts to cover the downside. With the kind of volatility I'm about to goose into this market, you're starting to sound like some pussy, Walton. Get naked, go native. Only way to fly. He did a twirl, then a kick. Just buckle in, dude, cause I'm gonna take that Jap money and pump my underlying stocks right into orbit. This play's a lock, taking money from a baby. Well, I wasn't blessed with your brand of raw courage, Jim Bob. So what do you say I do a little hedging for you? We'll be partners. I'll cover the downside with my own money, assuming I've got any left. I'll buy a few puts, and then if these stock prices just decide to go crazy and crash, we can still sell at the current quotes. Protect ourselves if things head south for some reason. Suit yourself, but that's the best way I can think of to piss away what little haircut you've got left. He was grinning again. Guess I'm a masochist. What can I tell you? While my new partner was laying the groundwork for his scam, loading up on options to buy stocks at today's prices, just before he turned around and shoved enough Japanese money into the market to send them sky high, I did the opposite. I got on the phone to various brokers, including a currently jubilant Sam Klein, and started buying at the money puts in Amy's name. Jim Bob was betting the market would head up, buying calls. I was betting it would go down, buying puts. I was laying a wager with anybody in America who would agree, for my front money, to buy a stock from me at today's quotes anytime through mid-March, even if the real price had since dropped to zilch, which I fully intended to make happen. Insider trading? Well, yes. You see, I was literally the only man on Earth who actually knew what the stock market was going to do next, after DNI started buying more of those stocks I'd planted with landmines. But I was a driven man just then. Maybe I'd go to jail eventually, but by God, Amy would still make college. Amy, what was she doing today? I wondered. This was, what, Tuesday, so she must be back at school, probably thinking about lunch. Strawberry yogurt and a bar of Tiger's Milk health candy. God, I loved that little dark-haired prize more than life itself. Where were we headed, she and I? Was I going to learn to let go? Maybe that wasn't going to be the problem, I thought, at least for her. Face it, I was about to become a fixture, just a stuffy impediment to nature's raging hormones. She'd already started rehearsing feminine wiles on me, practicing that coy, downcast glance that didn't quite break subliminal eye contact. Where did she learn stuff like that? And she almost had it down cold. Next, it'll probably be eyeshadow and colored bras. Damn, this Christmas was going to be my last real chance to get to know her, to bore her silly with all my eminently ignorable, fatherly advice. And I blew it. That in itself was enough to make me want to deep six Matsuo Noda forever, the bastard. The money I fully planned to recoup, her 13th Christmas, was gone forever. With which somber thought, I returned to buying puts. By the time I'd finished, Tam had her death wish list ready, and Jim Bob was just wrapping up his new program of call option acquisition. Now for phase 2. I strolled over to his monitor, carrying her paper. Jim Bob, these might be a good place to start. I tossed the sheet down beside his keyboard. Why not just set up a lot of buy orders to hit the market tomorrow at the opening? Doing it all at once should drive the prices straight up. Right, he leaned back, twitching. Wonder how much buying it'll take. Well, why not play it safe? Use the computer and just boost DNI high-tech portfolio another. 5% straight across the board. Every issue. Program it and let her rip. You've already got Tam's cell set up. All you have to do is turn it around. Sounds good to me. Now he was swaying to and fro, humming tonelessly. Then let's get rolling. You hit Amex and the big board. Tam and I'll see if we can't drop orders for a few blocks on Jeffries, the off-exchange network. We have to make waves at the opening bell tomorrow. Hear you talkin'. These issues gotta look like major movers. He was beaming from ear to ear as he revolved shakily back to his terminal. Damn if I don't just love screwing the market. We went to work, and for the next half hour we transmitted buy orders to the farthest reaches of the globe. Once they were posted, it didn't matter when they'd be executed. Even if Noda killed us, a hand from the grave would come back and destroy him. The time bomb I'd set would blow the minute the SEC tallied up DNI new holdings. There were about to be a lot of rich, happy workers in this land of the free. But the one man certain not to be among their number was Matsuo Noda. Speaking of which, Mr. Walton, would you kindly explain what you are doing? I froze, realizing he was standing directly behind my chair. How long had he been there? I'd been too absorbed to pay attention. Stupid, Walton, extremely stupid. Tell you the truth, Noda-san. I wheeled around and looked him in the eye, shielding the screen. Sometimes you have to make the best of things. Discretion's the better part of valor, so we're told. I'm familiar with the expression. He appeared less than convinced. Who knows, maybe Nipponica is the way to go. We needed time, just a little more time. In any case, I'm a firm believer in riding the horse the direction it's going. So I persuaded Jim Bob to buy a few options for me. Trouble is, the guy's a little tentative on reality just now. Decidedly. He glanced over at our mutual friend, now typing away obliviously, then turned and moved on toward the water cooler next to my office. Did he believe me? Maybe he actually thought we would just roll over and give up. Or possibly Noda was in that unconscious mind state that goes along with real mastery in swordsmanship. When a Zen archer discharges an arrow, his concentration must never be on that shaft. It must be on nothing. And the same is true with swordsmanship. Your mind must be in its natural state, empty of distractions. So if Noda allowed himself to focus on the small stuff right now, he'd forfeit his no-mind edge. Well, we were about through anyway. The only thing left was to keep him occupied just long enough for Jim Bob to finish sending out the last of our buys. The sword was a masterful idea, Noda-san. I got up and walked over to join him. How'd you manage it? Mr. Walton, what exactly do you know about the Emperor Antoku's imperial sword? He sipped from a plastic cup, eyes squinting behind his rimless specs. Probably more than I should. Then you will understand its recovery is a turning point in the history of Japan. I looked at him and realized he believed it, actually believed it. Matsuo Noda had become a legend in his own mind. Why tamper with perfection? Have to admit, too, the idea of using our international bank cover to gobble up America's blue chips incognito was a stroke of genius. Congratulations. You're about to scare Meade and the rest of Japan half to death. Not to mention the world. With DNI heading up the management, who knows what could happen? You can probably write your own ticket back home after this. Your friend Dr. Henderson's young colleague was invaluable. Alas, poor Jim Bob. Did that mean he wasn't going to live long enough to spend the new fortune he thought he was about to make? Maybe Noda was planning to do half of my work for me. I guess a few of those phone taps you like so much led you straight to him, right? You were probably at least a day ahead of everything we did. Good intelligence is vital to any successful endeavor, Mr. Walton. You should remember that from Sun Tzu's classic Art of War. The man was right on. All these dummy corporations. I was still running the stall. A little stock bought by each one, the SEC will never suspect. You just roll trades worldwide till, as long as necessary. Who knows you're doing this? Was it possible some rogue financier such as Noda really could pull a fast one on the whole world, use Japanese institutional money for whatever he pleased? Have you cleared this with the fund managers? It was not necessary, Mr. Walton. I have long since earned the trust of my colleagues. Again, he had a weird look in his eye. Matsuo Noda, I realized, was currently operating from a distant planet. Needless to say, our dialogue hadn't done a lot to calm my nervous system. The obvious solution to Noda's secrecy requirements didn't include a lengthy lifespan for a lot of loud-mouthed gaijin. Time to wrap up the stock market games and get back to swordsmanship. At this point, there's only one problem left, but I suppose you've already thought of it too. If word of this anonymous takeover breaks too soon, the exchanges might just decide to shut down trading and stop you, which means we're all a threat to you at this point. He stood unmoving. That matter will be addressed presently. How soon, I wondered, was presently. But haven't you forgotten somebody? Bill Henderson. The man's no fool. The minute he figures out your play, which he surely will, he's going to start blowing word all over the newspapers. You'll never get away with this. Noda smiled lightly. It would be helpful if he were here now. Perhaps you could be good enough to arrange for it. So with Matsuo Noda standing over me, Yuzi next to my head, I called Henderson on my speakerphone. He picked up after 8 rings. Bill, getting rich. Walton, what time is it? Goddamn, you woke me up. He yawned into the receiver. Jesus, I feel like hell. What's going on? Everything's still looking okay. Couldn't be better. Quite a party around here. Want to come back down and help us celebrate. Well, what the? It's after 11 already. Hey, let me check out the market first. Be down there in a little. I looked up as Noda fingered his Yuzi. Just come on over now. Don't putz around with the market. We could use the company. And Bill. Yeah, this shindig's Bayob. So how about picking up a 5th of scotch? That way, we can all get into the spirit of things here on the 11th floor. Walton, that's a hell of a... I know bringing your own booze is not your style. But why don't you check in with Eddie, the security chief downstairs? He always keeps me a bottle of Suntory there in the utility room. See him about it. That Japanese crap. Matt, what are you talking about? You know I hate. Just ask for Eddie, Bill. I cut him off. Tell him Matthew Walton wants his black label Japanese juice sent up here immediately. Understand? I hung up before Henderson could say anything more. Such as tell me we both knew there was no such thing as black label Suntory. Guess he'll be here shortly. I turned back to Noda. He should be here in no time at all, Mr. Walton. 2 of my guards have been posted outside his building since he returned there yesterday. For his own safety, they will bring him. With that chilling bit of news, Matsuo Noda proceeded to yank out the phone cord, then head back to his office. The art of war. You leave nothing to chance. In fact, his 2 sumo heavies were now standing outside my office, keeping a close eye on us. Guess he no longer had full confidence in Jim Bob. Tam, did you catch what just happened? I'd walked back over to the terminals. I did. She was staring into space. Henderson was our best hope to get out of here alive. He has a suspicious mind the equal of Sherlock Holmes's. But now... Matt, what's he going to do to us all? Don't think it'll be pretty. Then she turned and was staring at the security entrance, wearing a quizzical expression. I wheeled around to look too, and at first I thought I might have been hallucinating. A female figure was emerging through the doors, wearing an outfit whose style I couldn't quite place. Maybe it was one of those bulky creations such as Yohji Yamamoto or some other avant-garde Japanese designer might dream up, but it didn't resemble anything I'd ever seen before. Silk like a kimono, yet with a flowing quality. Ancient almost. Then I had a vision, just offbeat enough to fit. An ink illustration out of the tale of Genji flashed before my eyes, and I realized I was seeing a hakama, something that hadn't been around the streets of Japan for roughly 800 years. The woman in it was wearing peculiar makeup, not punk, though it might have been. It was pale, like the delicate ink shadings on a high-in-hand scroll. She looked for all the world like a court lady of ages past. She'd have fit right in at some 1185 high-in linked verse soiree. Old Kyoto come to life. Is this the latest neo-new wave? What in good Christ? The only uncoordinated touch was the handbag, leather and starkly modern, with a lock attached. Jim Bob gave her a glazed stare as she moved right past him, headed for us. The sumo pair was bowing to the floor. Well, well, the Emperor's most devoted courtier had finally arrived. Into our presence on this day of days had returned none other than Miss Akira Mori. One look at her eyes told me she'd come to kill somebody. Chapter 29. Mr. Walton, where is the silver case? She'd walked straight up to us, and now was just standing there, awaiting an answer. Mori-san, that silver box is long gone, thanks to Noda. I suddenly felt as if we just dropped out of the 20th century and back into the 12th. Time warp. Let me tell you something. It was like the apple in the Garden of Eden. Bite into it and out would spew the knowledge of good and evil. Better to forget the whole thing. You don't know anything. Definite point. We've just discovered there was a heck of a lot we didn't know. I thumbed toward Noda's office, including the scope of Dai Nippon's impressive new investment program. She ignored that response entirely as she whirled on Tam, her voice increasingly strident. Dr. Richardson, you have betrayed His Majesty. Mori-san, you and everybody who's helping Noda are the ones who have done the betraying. Tam stared her in the eye, daggers. Even though you are Fujiwara, you still let him continue, Mori pressed on, oblivious. His scheme to manipulate the Emperor, to undermine Midi. That's got nothing to do with. It is the duty of a Fujiwara to protect His Majesty. Speaking of His Majesty, I cut in. How much did you have to do with Noda's fake sword? Guess that protected the Emperor too. Nothing like being handed a new lease on divinity. The sword was to be his gift to me, she said it hesitantly, to restore. Perhaps we can clarify what it's really intended to restore, Mori-san, I interrupted again. The shogunate, with Noda as. She turned on me, and you helped him too. What? You and Asano-san stole the only thing I could have used to stop him. The contents of that silver case, and then this operation, after I'd tried to warn you both. Mori-san, could be we're all acting under certain misunderstandings here today. For starters, buying up every American blue chip issue in sight was not exactly our idea. She stared at me for a second, disbelieving. But that is precisely what you are doing. Think again. I pointed toward Noda's office. That's his game, helped along by that sharpshooter over at the console. I waved to Jim Bob, who toasted us with his champagne glass, still too zonked on uppers to comprehend the revised ground rules. Maybe you'd like to run through it with them. She seemed to notice him for the first time. Who is that person? Noda's new hired gun. We've been retired, without even so much as a gold watch. He is the one responsible. He's good, tell you that, fooled us all. I settled onto the office couch. Noda's got him and this supercomputer. Looks like goodbye America. Noda's office door, incidentally, was still firmly closed, so presumably he wasn't yet aware of Mori's arrival. Were we about to see history replayed before our very eyes? That fateful battle of Dan-no, Yura staged all over again. 800 years later, as a loyal retainer of the Emperor fought to thwart the armed takeover of a would-be shogun. Wonder who was going to win this time around. Mr. Walton, this must be stopped. She was turning the key on her new leather handbag, unlocking it. I also insist you return your copy of the contents of that case. Having that is the only way I can. Mori-san, not so long ago the contents of that silver box were very dear to our hearts, which is one reason we took the precaution of storing a facsimile on the hard disk memory of the mainframe here. Now, There are about 10 zillion files in that computer, so all you have to do is figure out what file name we used, and you can just run off all the copies you want. I got up and faced her. At the moment, though, there are more pressing worries. You are playing with fire, Mr. Walton. She glanced at the computer room down at the other end of the floor. No kidding. This is a tough game we've got going. Maybe you'd like to get an update from the other team too, Noda and his new crony. Are you saying he is the one? She was pointing toward Jim Bob, who was now winding up the last dispatch of our new buy orders. I noticed it was the third time she had inquired. Don't take our say-so for it. Go ask him. Without a word, she spun around, leaving a cloud of exquisite floral perfume in her wake. Tell the truth, I rather liked the designer outfit, what you might call a real classic. What I didn't care for all that much were the vibes. Very, very ominous. As she strode toward Jim Bob, he watched her with an unfocused gaze. He apparently assumed it was all some costume party gag. Definitely a major mistake. I am Akira Mori. Probably by then, he no longer knew what he was seeing. He revolved around, adjusted the Uzi leaning against the console, and extended his paw. Pleased to make your acquaintance. Jim Bob McClinton, you work for Mr. Noda. In a manner of speaking, she ignored the proffered handshake. Is it true you are now in his employ? I was. At the moment, though, I'm taking care of myself, American style, if you want to know. Whatever you are doing, I hereby order you to terminate all activities in this office. Immediately. Jim Bob just stared at her, not quite sure his brain wasn't playing more tricks. Well now, I'd normally like to oblige a pretty lady like yourself, but I'm afraid I just don't have any intention of doing that. He grinned, eyes flashing. Are you telling me you refuse? You hear real good. He reached down for the Uzi, and his bloodshot eyes began to blink. Far as that goes, where I come from, we're not used to taking orders from cute little twats. So the best thing for you to do would be to shake your ass out of my way and mind your own business. Or maybe go talk things over with Noda. He thumbed toward the office. In there. She was opening her handbag, reaching inside. Jim Bob, I was wanting to yell, this woman is neither cute nor little. Above all, she is definitely not a twat. You are now face to face with a world heavyweight ball breaker, who may be about to take that Uzi you're so proud of and tie it around your scrofulous neck. This game is way over your head. Can't you see where it's headed? Matt, what's she doing? Tam bolted forward. Sad to say, everybody was too late, including Henderson, by probably no more than a second or so. I watched Jim Bob swing around his automatic, and then the lights went out. We heard the dull thunk of a silencer, followed by another, and next the sound of a chair crashing backward, and Uzi clattering across the floor. It was indeed Dan no Yura all over again, only this time the Shogun's forces had just taken the first hit. But at least Henderson must have eluded Noda's guerrillas. How'd he do it? Whatever had happened, he'd gotten the message. Suntory black. He'd had Eddie yank the master switch for the 11th floor. He blacked out Dai Nippon. For what good it did? Not much, as things transpired. He'd only cut the overheads. The computer must have had its own backup power, some circuit that didn't run through the main utility room. The office was now eerily illuminated by CRT screens, still buying blue chips. As usual, Noda had prepared for all eventualities. Gingerly, we inched out onto the floor. Jim Bob was sprawled beside his console in a spreading pool of blood. Maybe he was still alive. Maybe not. Tam reached down to check the pulse at his neck. It's gone, she looked up, stunned. Who was next? More to the point, where the hell was Mori? Then we saw her, moving like a ghostly figure in a no-play, gliding through the bizarre lime-colored light of the terminals. We watched as she disappeared into Noda's office, trailed by the two dumbstruck guards. What a standoff, I reflected fleetingly. The would-be shogun versus the emperor's #1 fan. This time, though, the imperial side is hopping mad and loaded for bear. Wonder who'll. There was, however, something more important to think about. The next few seconds could turn everything around. This was hardly the time for historical meditations. With deliberate haste, we might even live long enough for some history of our own later. In the dim glow of the screens, Tam grabbed Jim Bob's Uzi, and we both dived for Noda's office. The door, happily, had just slammed shut. Since it was the kind that opened out, all we had to do was shove a desk against it, and they were contained. Now, how much time did we have? The mainframe. She was staring through the green shadows toward the glassed-in room that contained the massive NEC. Matthew, we've got to shut it down somehow. That's the only way left to stop him. Is there an on-off switch? Who knew how you went about disconnecting a $20 million supercomputer? We're about to find out, she led the way. The entry door was glass, half-inch, and locked. Beyond it stood the string of 6-foot-high modules, off-white and octagonal, lined up like squat soldiers on flooring elevated about 6 inches above that outside. The nerve center of Noda's empire rested there on its platform, silent and secure. Tam, pass me that thing. I reached for the Uzi, turned it around, and rammed the steel butt against the glass. Then again, it just bounced off. Harder. Okay, but stand away. I hauled back and swing at it with all my might. With a sickening crunch, the glass shattered inward, spewing shards across the icy tiles inside. An alarm went off somewhere out on the floor, but we just ignored it. After I'd punched away a few hanging pieces, we stepped in and up. I handed back the Uzi. Now what? It's freezing in here. She shivered from the cold, then pointed down. You know, all the wiring must be underneath this raised floor. There's no way to even know where the power conduit is, let alone reach it. Okay, guess we'll just have to start ripping. My heart skipped a beat. As my eyes adjusted to the dim light, I finally noticed what I should have seen immediately. Lying atop the big computation module was a thin, 4-foot-long bundle, swathed in silk. So there's where he decided to put it, in the one room that would always be locked. Or maybe, he thought, it should be kept in the most powerful location on the premises. I reached up and retrieved it, then pulled away the silk. The blade had just been freshly oiled, and it literally glistened in the dim light. It was every bit as razor-sharp as the day it had been consecrated 800 years ago at the zenith of samurai metallurgy. Guess Noda knew a prize when he saw it. And this katana was definitely a one-of-a-kind piece, an old sword, kodo, from the Sanjo branch of the Yamashiro school of swordsmiths, late Heian. Signed by Munechika, said to have fashioned samurai swords for the shogun Minamoto Yoritomo himself, the man who destroyed the imperial forces at Dan-no-Ura. No wonder Noda had treated it with special reverence. Welcome, I held it up. Why do you suppose he put it in here? She was admiring it, too. You know, I think I understand. But it's the kind of thing that can't be explained in words. Well, at least you've got it back again. Samson's hair, are you pleased? Maybe Noda was trying to tell me something. Send a message. But now I'm going to send one back. Do you really think she was already ahead of me? Guess we're about to find out. I bowed to the blade ritually, then to the neck's head-high main processor. From the first shogun to the last. This, I muttered silently, is for Amy. Her answer, Noda-san. The great masters of swordsmanship all will tell you something very ironic. If you train for years and years, all your moves eventually become instinctive, You literally no longer know what you are doing. You become oblivious of your mind, as unknowing, consciously, of technique as the day you started. Thus, the greatest masters and the rankest beginners actually share something very similar. Both are totally unaware of technique. Was I closer to the mindless beginner or the no-mind master? Friends, that's one confession you'll need medieval torture to extract. I will, however, admit to thinking about which stroke to use. There are several that might have done the job. Of them all, though, the kessa seemed best for some reason. It slices diagonally, from the left shoulder down and across to the right, and a swordsman pure in spirit can literally bisect a man, slice him right in half. As the blade sang through the cold and struck with a ring true as a bell, I felt nothing, thought nothing. The hexagonal computation unit standing in front of us wasn't halved, not even close, but it was severely disoriented. I felt a small tingle in my fingertips as the sword sailed through the outer steel casing and severed its first layer of silicon neurons, sending forth a shower of sparks. It wasn't dead, but then the sword had some backup. There is a long tradition in Japanese culture of cooperation, support from others. For example, in seppuku, the ritual disembowelment sometimes called harakiri, there is always a second participant who stands behind you and ceremonially lops off your head as your body topples forward. It is an honored assignment. My action may have been satisfying symbolically, but it wouldn't do the job alone. Fortunately, it didn't have to. There was one simple way to disengage Noda's electronic brain, now and forever. Tam didn't even hesitate. For a second there, it could have been the 4th of July. And Yuzi blasting away in the dark is a marvel. I watched spellbound as she emptied about 20 rounds into the processor bank, as well as into everything else in sight, continuing until smoke started to pour out of the flooring below, followed by the crackle of electrical shorting. Then, several storage modules began to arc, their high voltage mating in midair. In moments, Noda's NEC supercomputer was transformed into a shorting, sputtering junk heap. After that, electrical fires erupted down below, and the linoleum squares beneath our feet proceeded to heat and buckle. Next, something flashed somewhere in the dark, and a stack of computer printouts lying next to the door burst into flame. Originally, I'd planned to retrieve the blade, but then I reflected a second and decided just to leave it. The sword in the supercomputer. A 6-figure gesture, maybe, but one worth every penny in satisfaction. Noda would definitely understand. By the time we made our way back through the shattered glass doorway, picking a path among the splinters, the fire was already spreading to the main office. Let's get out of here. Tam was still grasping the Uzi. Not so fast. I reached for the grip. You don't get to have all the fun. How do you operate this thing? Just pull there, she pointed, then raised the muzzle. Careful, you might need that foot someday. I lifted it up, and it coughed a burst of flame. The water cooler outside my office exploded. I think you have to be Chuck Norris to do it like that. On a scale of 1 to 10, that round scores down in the fractions. Better aim. Spoil sport, but I did. I took critical bead on a leering green monitor, squeezed, and felt a light kick from the metal stock. Out blinked one of the dying monster's eyes. Then I methodically took out 6 more workstations, just for the hell of it. Automatic weapons fire can be great therapy, not to mention fun. Okay for a beginner. Matt, she was pointing at the desk of Noda's secretary. A phone light had just flashed on. He's calling in reinforcements. Time to make our not-so-graceful exit. Bring the automatic. You've got it. And I'm a little embarrassed to ask you for money, but would you mind grabbing your purse? We may need it. "You're now broke, right?" She dashed for her office. "So we're told." I was wrapping the Uzi in some computer printouts that hadn't yet caught fire. The place was really starting to blaze, thanks to all the paper. Smoke everywhere. While she was coming back, I decided to go over and kick. The desk away from Noda's door. Sure, it was a risk, but we couldn't let him burn to death. Or Maury. Besides, we were home free. With the NEC supercomputer blown to pieces, as well as Jim Bob, there was absolutely no way Noda could cancel that stack of buy orders we'd seeded all around the globe. Nothing could stop the bomb. As we made our way through security, we saw Maury coming out of the office, choking through the smoke and looking crazed as ever. Apparently the Battle of Dan no Yura, 20th century style, was still raging. Then Noda appeared in the doorway behind her and just stood there surveying the blazing ruins of his empire. With his customary discipline, he appeared totally unperturbed by it all. Not her. Though she lunged for the remains of the computer room, now billowing smoke and tongues of fire. The last thing on her mind, apparently, was us. Which was just as well, because the second we hit the hallway, we heard the elevator chime. It had to be Noda's backup forces. Without a word, we both ducked for the stairwell, and as the metal door slammed behind us, Tanaka and a host of armed DNI security guards poured off the elevator like gangbusters. Turns out there'd been a small army poised downstairs, just in case. They could have the place, what was left of it. My last memory of that office was a raging torrent of smoke and flame. Nothing remained. This had to be the grand finale for Dai Nippon and Matsuo Noda. The end. Finis. Barring unforeseen developments. Chapter 30. When we emerged into the lobby calmly, as we could muster, fire engines were racing up outside. Cops were crowded around the elevators. And Eddie was so frantic yelling about the Holocaust up on 11, he didn't even bother to say hello. We searched in vain for Henderson as we worked our way through the milling throng, headed for the pay phone in the corner. Bill had to be somewhere. Nobody else would have blacked out the DNI offices. My first thought, though, was that we needed to make tracks. The brouhaha to come would best be handled from the safety of a foreign shore. Fortunately, in my pocket was just enough change for one call, and as luck would have it, our man was in. Sure, Matt, no problem, but this is damned sudden. Right now, Patrick, and hurry. Could be the perfect moment for an extended vacation. How about just sending the car around, over on 3rd near? That Japanese place you told me you work for. Worked for Patrick no more, just got laid off. Hell, I know where they are. It's all over the tube. I'm sitting here right now watching Jack O'Donnell blow his stack at a press briefing down in D.C. Wish you could see the guy. It's live on CNN. Is this thing for real? What was that Dai Nippon outfit trying to do? Buy up every. Incredible. Henderson had really come through. Patrick. Yeah. Fill you in on all the details over a drink someday. Right now, though, we could really use Charlie and the car ASAP. We'll be waiting outside. I looked at the smoke-smeared woman standing beside me. Truthfully, I'm hoping for some company. Tam smiled, then reached out and took my hand. Not a word about strictly business. Okay, Matt, Charlie just walked in. I'll send him straight on over. Thanks a million. Owe you a big one. As we moved on out through the revolving doors, we finally spotted Henderson, wearing his gray topcoat, and mingled in among the crowd on the sidewalk. The lowest of low profiles. For a second, I almost didn't recognize the man. He looked a wreck, standing there shading his eyes and squinting up. Then I followed his gaze and realized smoke was pouring out of the windows on 11. Seems we demolished a little exterior plate glass, too, along with everything else. "Bill," I signaled, "over here." "Walton, thank God." He waved and pushed our way. "I was worried Stiff you two might still be up there. What in hell happened? Did you just blow up?" "Long story. There was a small war, a new one and an old one. But how'd you get here?" "Noda said he was having your place watched. A couple of." "Yeah, I saw those two apes. They were in my lobby in handcuffs, being grilled by New York's finest when I came through. Our doorman figured they were casing us for a robbery and called the cops. What's Noda think I live in a fucking tent? I pay for top security, friend. The best. Anyway, nice work with the lights. Much appreciated. The bad news is, you might want to get out of town for a while. Maybe go skiing someplace. The whole thing fell apart. Noda just brought in a whole new load of funding. Hell, I figured that out the minute I saw the Times lying there outside my door. Only one place the market could be getting this kind of dough. Tokyo pension funds. So I went back in and called Jack. You made the right move, tipping him off. Maybe he can get trading shut down. Stop it somehow. We stopped it ourselves, Tam interjected, then indicated the paper bundle in her hands, black metal stock protruding out of one corner. God almighty. He stared around at the policemen racing by, walkie-talkies chattering. Where's Jim Bob? I got a good mind to. Your hotshot screwed us, Bill. Noda got to him and bought him off. I figured that out too, little fucker, he grimaced. Guess I trained him too well. He didn't deserve his payoff. Somebody'd better hustle a medic up there fast. Let them take care of it. He thumbed at the firemen piling off their trucks, then bent over and pecked Tam on the cheek. Well, Professor, it's been short and sweet. Keep him honest. He reached for my hand. Walton, you know how I hate to travel on short notice, but considering the situation, St. Moritz might be nice for a while. Drink some Père William for us. Will do, best of luck. Same to you. I watched him flip up the collar on his coat as he turned. Oh, by the way, Bill, one last thing. Yeah, he glanced back. Want a little insider information. Wouldn't dream of listening. He returned like a shot. Might not be a bad idea to short every high-tech stock DNI currently holds. There's a finite possibility all hell's going to break loose at the opening tomorrow. What's the story? He was all ears. Tam turned to me. Are you finally going to explain what that scam with Jim Bob was all about? Well, now there's some time. What I did was sucker him into posting buy orders for an additional 5% of every company on your kill list. I'm well aware of that. She just continued to stare. Which means that when the SEC reports those holdings, it'll trigger the new provisions their majority stockholder, with whose power of attorney I acted, with full legal authority voted last week. Which was... It's a little like what's being called a tin parachute these days. The latest twist on the anti-takeover poison pill. Isn't that where managements have their boards vote that a hostile buyout will trigger big disbursements of a company's assets to the rank and file? What's that got to do with? That's the play. Great takeover defense, by the way. But Noda had already taken those companies over. She frowned, puzzling. Right, obviously, nobody's supposed to institute one after a takeover. But that's what Dai Nippon voted to do last Wednesday and Thursday for every company it owns. The way it's set up now, if the majority stockholder in any of those companies, which just happens to be DNI, acquires another 4% or more. All that stockholders' stock is automatically dispersed to the employees. Just like that. Fully legal, like a tin parachute. But what will? Let me finish. In my version, there are some strings attached. The money can't be used to just go out and buy Toyotas. I arranged it so that all the stock will be held in escrow for 10 years and used as collateral for loans specially earmarked to finance expansion and R&D. In other words, the employees are about to become those companies' new bank partner. What in holy hell are you talking about? Henderson appeared to have just entered shock. His bloodshot eyes were like saucers. Noda's piece of those high-tech outfits is just going to be given to the troops, then locked up as security for new financing. Bill, try and think of it as a different kind of restructuring, that grand new corporate scam. But instead of the standard ripoff where managers entrench themselves by loading up a company with debt and bribing their shareholders with the money, I turned the whole thing upside down. Gave the control of those companies to their workers, who will now have a stake in dividends and profits. Walton, you idiot. Stock prices for those outfits are going to nosedive the second news of this hits the street. It'll scare the institutions shitless. I've never heard anything so crazy. Who knows what'll happen? Let the supply-side economists try and figure it out. My guess is we're about to find out if anybody here still believes in the working man. In any case, it can't make things worse, and it should be great fun to watch. At least American industry is about to be owned by the people who punch the time clocks. Maybe working for ourselves instead of investment bankers will help things get rolling again. I don't believe you did this. Tam fell against me laughing. Do you realize what it really means? Noda's totally destroyed. He'll have to sell off that new portfolio of blue chips just to have enough profit to cover the claims of his original 800-year fund investors. After this, no Japanese money manager is going to give him a yen. He's history. Bushido, when you break the rules, things like that can happen. Jesus, I'm not going to screw around short selling. I'm just going to load up on puts before the opening tomorrow. You ought to do the same, Walton. When the street gets wind of this and all those stocks crater, you could clear millions. Bill headed briskly up the avenue. Stay well. We watched him disappear into the crowd, then started searching for Charlie Morgan and the car. Incidentally, the recipient of that phone call wasn't really named Patrick. Since there are laws about smuggling firearms in and out of countries, and we damned well were going to take along the Uzi, it seems only right to give him a pseudonym. His charter outfit, which works out of that hangar off to the side of the Majors at Kennedy, keeps a Lear that can make the Caribbean in one hop if it's not too full. He even picks you up in a limo. His come-on for the carriage trade. About 10 minutes later, we saw Charlie working the rolls around all the fire engines double-parked on 3rd and waving for us. Good to see you again, Matt. He glanced back as we settled in. Christ, you two look terrible. Were you up there? Just left. Must have been a hell of a fire from the looks of it. He hit the gas and made a right turn. Where to? Straight down 5th to your place. One quick stop first, over on West 78th. The west side, in this traffic. Come on, Matt, I still haven't had lunch. Just cut through Central Park. Should be a snap. While he and Tam waited outside the west side free school, I went in to try and kidnap Amy. It wasn't easy. I finally explained to Miss Winters that my daughter's Christmas vacation had merely been delayed a little this year, but better late than never. After some haggling, we struck a deal on homework. Then, in a limo piled high with school books, class projects, lunch boxes, and a black Israeli Uzi, we headed downtown. Dad, you've gone nuts. My only offspring was in heaven. Honey, we're going to snorkel for 2 weeks solid. Think you can stand the old man for that long? Can we have a Christmas tree? You promised. I'll cut it myself. And a Christmas party, too. Might have to call it something else, but I suppose we can give it a try, if you keep up on the homework. I looked at her, failing as usual to understand the movements of her mind. Sweetie, why do you want to throw a party? This is supposed to be a vacation. Dad, really? Don't you remember that neat boy from Sweden whose parents have that house across the bay? He was teaching me windsurfing last summer. He's in junior year now, but if he's there, we've got to have a party. Don't you understand? Guess we'll have a party. What can you do? Nobody said you're supposed to win them all. Bad news, or maybe it was good news, travels with amazing speed in this day and age. The late edition of the Tuesday New York Post found its way to the Caribbean on an evening flight, and since it took us a while to get out of town, it actually reached the Virgin Islands shortly before we did. However, since we flew directly into St. Croix instead of the main island of St. Thomas, we missed the delivery. As it happened, though, an old acquaintance was passing the house that night on a personal mission, and he was kind enough to drop off Rupert Murdoch's Tuesday contribution to journalism. The time was around 10 p.m. Amy was sound asleep, conked out from twilight windsurfing, and Tam and I were working on a pitcher of Planter's Punch by the pool when there came the sound of honking out front. I went in and unlocked the entry, then peeked out to see who it was. The red, white, and blue Jeep belonged to none other than Artie Wilson, dressed to the nines. Walton, my man, you done gone and got yourself famous. He grinned with delight, then threw a rolled-up newspaper toward the door. Told you it'd be yo ass. Artie, what in hell? Turn that thing off and come in for a drink. Somebody I want you to meet. Hey, late for a reception at that new place down the beach. Think all them hot New York divorcees just come down here for nothing but sunshine and vitamin D. Gotta keep the tourists satisfied. He revved his engine and began backing out the drive. Tomorrow, maybe. Feds ain't nailed yo honky butt by then. With which enigmatic pronouncement, he sped into the humid night. I picked up the bundle, then snapped on the yard lights and strolled back out where Tam was sitting, still wearing her pool robe. What was Artie talking about? As I settled down beside her and unrolled the paper, staring back at us from the front page were two very familiar faces. Off one of my book jackets, she said, I never much cared for it. Mine's from their photo morgue during some takeover circus. Guess we should have been keeping closer tabs on the news. Seems that Matsuo Noda, president of Dai Nippon, Int., had held a press conference mid-afternoon Tuesday to refute all the misinformation being spread by Senator Jack O'Donnell. As he claimed, it was actually two Americans, former employees of DNI, who had been responsible for Dai Nippon's secret hostile takeover of the U.S.'s largest corporations. He made this point to dispute Senator O'Donnell's assertion that they had been the ones who'd stopped it. See photo, page 1. He went on to apologize for what apparently had been a severe communications mix-up within DNI, which brought about this unauthorized action. Chapped Rand, he was pleased to report, he personally had taken steps to terminate the buy-up this very morning. As of 11:53 a.m. Run that whopper by Jack's subcommittee, Noda-san. There was more. Seems the body of an unidentified male, young, Caucasian, and badly burned, had been recovered by firemen on the 11th floor of DNI offices. Noda had no idea who this person was, perhaps a misfortunate prowler. Matt, look. She was pointing at a paragraph on the lower half of the page. There'd been a second casualty, although not as serious. The well-known Japanese financial commentator Akira Mori had been borne unconscious from the premises. Acute smoke inhalation. As of press time, she was in intensive care at MT Sinai Hospital. We saw her come out of the office. It was pretty smoky by then, but how could? The answer followed. Firemen reportedly had discovered her in the computer room near the mainframe's burned-out storage banks. Speculation was she had been attempting to save the hard disks, the vital DNI files. Mori wasn't trying to save anything. Tam tossed down the paper. She wanted to make sure all the disks were destroyed, to protect the Emperor from a scandal over Noda's sword hoax. Another victim for the Imperial sword. I looked up at the starry sky, a mosaic of silver and black as the Milky Way floated above us. The night air was symphonic with the sound of crickets. How many more? Then she retrieved the post, and we finished the item. After Noda's prepared statement, there had been a queue, and during which he reaffirmed his intention to use all available means to block Senator O'Donnell's subpoena of DNI remaining records, an action he declared confiscatory and groundless. Privileged information, etc. He did, however, manage to wrap things up on a forward-looking note. Today's unfortunate, indeed tragic, accidental fire should be understood as merely a momentary setback. Nothing that had happened would in any way diminish his program of capital infusion and open market acquisition in America's high-tech sector. Wall Street need not worry. Senator O'Donnell's harassment notwithstanding, Dai Nippon's money was here to stay. We were now partners. His grand new alliance, Nipponica, would shape the world to come. That's what he thinks, she laughed. Wait till he wakes up tomorrow and discovers he just donated all his high-tech acquisitions to their employees. Don't think that fits the big strategy. One thing, though, America's overpaid. Golf-playing senior executives could have some wild and woolly board meetings ahead. Life's full of surprises. I pulled her over and slipped my arm around. And the biggest one for me, this week at least, has been you. She turned and kissed me softly on the mouth, then again. My heart skipped. Whereupon she abruptly rose and dove headfirst into the pool, without her suit. Looked to be a second chance coming up this year, for us all.